say, that the court raised with my learned friend concerning prayer form. That prayer in the context of the current proceedings is untenable, we submit with respect. Is untenable for two reasons. Prayer form. And in other words, it cannot be granted in view of the structure of the Constitution, particularly the provisions of Section 22(2) that provides the applicants would have other remedies under the applicable law, and the applicants would have an alternative remedy, adequate remedy, under the National Assembly Electoral Act of 2011. If there are any complaints that political parties have not complied, they might as well approach the IEC and complain about such political parties. But I submit, therefore, this is not a proper forum to deal with such issue as contemplated in prayer form. So that prayer cannot be granted. The next point, Lord, a learned friend said, well, political parties are given enormous powers, enormous tasks, and they can't execute that enormous task when they are not compliant. But that's not the requirement, I submit, of Section 66(4). Section 66(4) simply requires this fact. Is this political party registered with the IEC? And if the answer is in the positive, that is all that we require. Whether they are compliant with other requirements of the law is neither here nor there. In other words, is of no moment. And therefore I submit that for that reason as well, that prayer cannot be granted. Simple terms, we don't go behind and inquire whether party A, B, or party X, Y is compliant. We simply ask, has it been registered in terms of Section 23 and other provisions of Part 3 of the National Assembly Act? And if so, then it is entitled to exercise its constitutional mandate. Now, then once I've dealt with that issue.
Is there a constitutional order that is being sought relative to prayer form?
My Lord, certainly there is none. There's no consequential order. And so that puts the matter to rest insofar as that prayer is concerned. I then move to the issue, and I'm not going to deal with the order in which my learned friend made his submission. Then there was the issue of the challenge relating to the procurement of the services of the fourth respondent. In other words, the applicants are challenging the appointment of the fourth respondent as a service provider to the forum of political parties. And our submission is very simple. They confront the same problem. In other words, they are confronted with the provisions of the Procurement Act. The Procurement Act, I submit with respect, provides inbuilt alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, procedures, and processes that must be followed in the event that one has a complaint concerning issues relating to the tender process. And therefore, once that is the case, I submit they face the same obstacle, that is of complying with Section 22, subsection 2 of the Constitution. In other words, they have adequate remedies under that act, and that was debated with my learned friend. They provide that the Procurement Act provides for things such as administrative review and appealing to the procurement tribunal. In other words, the section, I apologize, my lady.
Before you provided, or the procedural remedies that they can have under the Procurement Act. The question that lies at the basic level is the Act even applicable to the 12 correspondent?
My lady, in the context of these proceedings, in other words,
As you deal with that question, Mr. Letsika, I would want you to pay attention to Section 4 of the Act. As you respond.
of the Procurement Act.
Yes, of the Procurement Act.
Yes, ma'am. I'll address both questions from my lady and your lordship. I submit, my lady, that the Procurement Act is not applicable in the inquiry of this nature. And where the simple issue, and I'll address that later on, where the simple issue is whether or not these applicants were disqualified. The first one was disqualified properly. The second one, whether the political parties committed any irregularities that would justify the Honorable Court to vitiate their processes. I therefore submit it's not applicable. But in any event, that they have, that is an alternative submission. They have adequate remedies that I've just discussed under the Procurement Act.
No. The question is, does the Act apply to the 12th respondent? Was the 12th respondent in his quest to procure the services of the 4th respondent mandated to comply with the provisions of the Procurement Act? And His Lordship Matalajay just said you should look at Section 4 of the Procurement Act in order to respond to the question as to whether the Act applies to the 12th respondent.
My lady, I submit that the Act doesn't apply. In other words, if the 4th respondent, as a forum of political parties, were to sit and were to have the necessary resources to seek to engage a consultant, the Procurement Act would not apply. But the Procurement Act applies simply because there is what I can call a tripartite relationship. There is the government, there is the UNDP, there is the 12 respondent, the forum of political parties, who don't have money, but who have to discharge a public mandate, a constitutional mandate. But they require resources and expertise and the skills. And for them to acquire that, the skills, they and the resources, they need somebody to assist them. And that somebody has their own conditions. So it's a sui generis kind of scenario. The 12 respondents, the Act doesn't apply to them, but they have got somebody who says, well, I can provide you with funding. But that somebody has also has to invite somebody to come into the fore, namely the government. And the government has its own process. They say, well, if there's a third party, an international organization that is ready to assist you, we are prepared also to assist you, but this is, bear in mind, the law, we are governed by the law. We can't just allow you to do as you please. You may wish to have these processes running as soon as necessary, but there is a cooling off period. We have to comply with it. So in short, I submit the Act doesn't apply to them alone. If they were to deal with and engage the services of a consultant sitting as political parties. But where now they roped in the government, a different set of circumstances had to apply. Namely, the government had to operationalize the Procurement Act.
But Letsika, have you looked at the section?
Yes, ma'am.
Where does it fit? It would appear that your proposition is that since the government had been roped in, or the government was now involved in a third party being UNDP, the Act applied to them. It seems to be what you are saying, but...
Well, it applied to the government, madam, not my clients.
Yeah.
Yes. My submission is that it doesn't apply and I'm speaking to the facts as they stand, my lord. And I do not suggest for a moment that the Act applies to my clients. They could do as they please. They could wake up and say, Mr. Letsika, you have skills. We want to engage you tomorrow. and engage me. But they were hampered by the fact that they did not have the financial resources. But in view of the provisions of Section 4, the Act doesn't apply to them as private parties. Thank you.
Mr. Ts'ehla, if you go to the interpretations section, procuring entity.
Yes, my lord.
When this wasn't this forum discharging the public duty
It was discharging a public duty, my lord.
under the Constitution?
Under the Constitution, yes, my lord.
So are they not a procuring entity as they are individual?
My lord, I submit with respect that they are not. At least when we contrast the Section 2 definition section with Section 4, which clearly articulates the scope of application of the Act.
No, I'll come to 4. But
Yeah.
I'm saying procuring entity, it says it blah blah, or any other body covered by public law. Isn't the forum covered by public law?
No,
i.e. the Constitution.
I submit not. The public law contemplated, the rate, is the laws that regulates that particular entity. Let's take, for example, my lord, Lesotho government, local government authorities. Those are governed by a specialized type of law. Or let us talk about state-owned institutions. For instance, LNDC, LEC, and the like.
So you're talking about statutory bodies.
Statutory
But
bodies.
I'm saying Parliament, is it not bound by the PFMA?
It is.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And
So that's a public law, isn't it?
yes, it is.
Yeah.
But
So that
oh, I'm
because
sorry.
Parliament is appropriated, it has a budget,
Yes,
isn't it?
that is.
Like other arms of the state,
Yes,
it has its own budget.
yes.
So the utilization of funds therein, in respect of tendering, have to comply with the tenets of the procurement.
With the Procurement Act.
Yeah.
But let's.
So to that extent, then when it procures, it's a procuring entity
Yes, ma'am.
because it's covered by a public law.
And not only yes.
I know we will shortly come to Section 4.
Yes.
Can we go there? Can we go there to Section 4?
Yeah. Section 4 defines.
And it appears, it says central government ministries and agencies, then it says enterprises wholly owned by the government, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Then it comes to the private sector, an entity in the private sector. That's why your tripartite doctrine comes
in. Yes.
Yes. That now you have an entity in the private sector, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Being given a responsibility to carry out activities on behalf of government. I suppose we can safely say on behalf of an arm of government.
Yes, on behalf of, well, the word government, we use it broadly.
Yeah, using public funds.
Yes.
So that the private sector entity, when it is engaged, utilization of public funds should be there.
Yes.
Here, the funds are not public funds.
They are not.
So they come from the
International organization.
organizations.
Yes.
So that the PFMA doesn't apply,
It doesn't apply.
isn't it?
Yes.
So isn't that actually the departure point, that although arms of the state are involved, that is the executive and parliament here,
Yes, ma'am.
but the company, the fourth respondent, the funds that were going to be used don't come from the coffers of the company,
That is so.
you see.
And let's remember. I'm sorry.
So, to that extent, to that limited extent, then 4, the Act wouldn't apply to the procurement processes of that are involved here.
Relating to respondent number 4 and number 12.
No, I'm saying the disputed tender.
Yes.
I'll come to the nature of the dispute.
Yes.
But I suppose that the applicants are impugning the award of the tender.
Yeah, they are impugning, my lord. They are
So I'm
impugning the
saying,
award.
but at least, as I understand the act, at a conceptual level, the issue is very straightforward.
Yes.
Whose funds are being employed here?
And the
The
moment,
funds that are being employed are not the coffers of government.
in other words,
Therefore, the PFME doesn't apply.
it doesn't apply.
Neither does the Procurement Act.
Yes.
So what was happening here? A notice is issued by the minister together with the forum,
Yes.
inviting
Bidders.
bidders,
Yes, ma'am.
you see. Then the forum is caught in this web of the procurement provisions,
Yeah.
cooling off period and all that stuff.
And they can't complain, my lord, because they are in desperate need of this fund. Because they require the services of this consultant to assist them to discharge this public mandate.
But I'm saying, why couldn't just say they select this company and then say, well, UNDP, can you assist with funds? We have selected the fourth responder.
Yeah, but on the
What would be the legal impediment?
well, there wouldn't be, and previously, my lord, and that is pleaded in the affidavit. But UNDP used to say, here is a database. We have a list of consultants. Choose the one you prefer, and we'll just pay off. And after they have provided services, yeah, and that changed in 2019 to say, look, then you can't do that. Choose your own, employ your own systems, engage a consultant, and later on, then they roped in the government. And I don't want to go to other issues, my lord, relating to a relationship between the government, international bodies, and my client. But the bottom line, they were caught in the what your lordship has called rightly so, as a web of acquisition of services, and they had to comply. Whether the government was right or wrong, really it was immaterial to them. What was important for them was for them to acquire the services of the consultant so that they could discharge their constitutional mandate as contemplated in section 66(4).
Is it by choice that they have to go along with the ministry, or is it by...
No, it was by force of compulsion.
They were compelled.
If you look at the minutes,
What was the legal compulsion?
Well,
is it the act, or is it just that the protocols of government, the minister said, no, you have to follow me?
It's protocols of government and what I would call the necessity of the situation. In other words, as if I may develop the point further, the lordships and my lady will observe that at one time they also said, what if this thing of government doesn't work? What plan B do we have? There's the minute where they even worked on plan B, just in case the appointment of the fourth respondent did not actualize. And say, let's form something that will assist us. So they really were adamant to discharge their constitutional mandate with expedition, given that the Council of State had given them 30 days within which to do so.
So the fourth respondent is a consultant.
Yes, ma'am.
He's not a tenderpreneur.
No. It's a private consultant who reacted to a bid and they were assessed in the manner that the 12 respondent did as set out in the affidavits, and then they qualified, and then they provide consulting services. So they are not a tenderpreneur.
Is there a tenderpreneur who lost?
Well, I'm not sure, because I guess anybody who tenders to provide...
No, I'm saying that before us, is there any tenderpreneur who's complaining that
there's none.
I lost, therefore, reverse this tender?
There's none.
Reverse the award.
No, there's none. As a matter of fact, that's one of our arguments, that none of the tenderpreneurs, none of the bidders, the 4 bidders, and later the remaining bidder is complaining. The persons who are complaining And that's why the fourth respondent is saying they don't even have locus standi to be challenging the award or to seek to invalidate the award in our favor, because they did not get involved in the process. And I submit the fourth respondent is correct in suggesting that they do not have locus standi to seek to impugn the award in their favor.
Is this not public interest litigation on their part?
Well, it is not, my lord. And I submit, if they were to follow the strict provisions of the Procurement Act, they would still be excluded. Because one of the questions would ask is, were you one of the bidders? And it deviates from the old regime, my lord, if I have read it properly. If His Lordship will remember the 2007 regulations amended in 2018, they provided that a member of the public could say, hang on, what are you doing here? And could intervene. But these ones are really geared towards ensuring that people who participated in the race can then complain about the process if there are any complaints. And I need not go deeper into the Act, how it provides the remedies and all.
So if a member of the public smells corruption, so be it.
So
I'm a taxpayer, but I smell corruption. According to this Act, unfortunately, you cannot complain anywhere.
well, we say hard luck. Were you a bidder? Oh, I was not. So hard luck. You can't complain anywhere. Even if you come to the court of law, Mufomu will hit you. They will say, well, who are you? What do you want? You can't.
You have
Really?
no stake.
I bet you have no stake in the
No
real
interest.
sense. Yes.
Let corruption fly.
Well, go and complain to the police. Go and complain to the DCO.
Not to set aside the tender.
Not to set aside the tender, and they are they even registering a complaint, my lord. The processes are quite complex to challenge and in other words, the legislature by design has said, well, let the processes under procurement be dealt with those with specialization in that area and with applicable processes, institutions, and so on and so forth.
Isn't the part of the difficulty, Mr. Letsika, is that even this forum or the award of the funds are not amenable to the jurisdiction of the Public Accounts Committee because they haven't utilized public funds.
Yes, they will, as I said, even public management legislation, public funds management legislation would not apply because the Public Accounts Committee would not ask anybody. They will say, well, we got funding from an international organization, and we don't even want to know how much they paid the consultant. All we are interested in is to consume the services of that consultant. Thank you, my lords and my lady. I just want to move to the next point. The next point being the issue of qualifications. When I started, I said the section 66(4) is in itself a disqualifying section. In other words, I submit that it constitutes complete bar, or it provides for impeachment for prospective candidates. And we asked this.
66(4) or 66(6)?
I'm sorry, my lady, 66(6). If I said 66(4), that was a slip of a tongue. 66(6) of the second amendment, and my lady.
You see, sorry, Mr. Letsika, you know that I'm a snail, isn't it? And I always want to go by the path.
Yes, sir.
You see, we haven't exhausted this because I have one or two questions.
Thank you.
On the procurement. The role of the fourth respondent. The role of the fourth respondent. Remember, the role of the fourth respondent is being impugned.
Yes.
I.e., that it had a shared responsibility. It did a job, part of the job that ought to have been done by the forum. I'm looking at the page 54 of the record, I think it's part of the annexure.
If His Lordship could be kind enough to tell me the annexure, I'm embarrassed to say, my Lord.
It's called annexure advert. It's by the applicant.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see that?
Your Lordships could bear. Yes. With me, it's page 46. I don't want to blame my learned friends. I think we discussed it, but
It seems it's a call for expressions of interest,
Yes, ma'am.
isn't it?
It is, ma'am.
Now I'm looking at the expected outputs and deliverables. The last column there. Not even the last column. That was the job that the fourth respondent was called upon to deliver on, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
The task.
Yes.
And the last column says we should prepare a report with recommendations shortlist of qualified candidates for submission to the relevant authorities. Then they submit to the Ministry of Justice and political parties forum.
Yes, ma'am. But
Here's what I just want to get assistance.
yes, ma'am.
It seems that when they participated in the process, actually that was what they were called upon to do. It's not that there was any irregularity on the part of the forum. Remember, they scored, is it 30%?
30%, yes.
Yeah.
That
So
is
the
acceptable.
30% job that they did actually was part of
Of their mandate.
their duties under the expression of interest.
And if I may take it any further, my Lord, it's things such as psychometric tests. The political parties don't have expertise to score any candidate on that. They said, we entrust you as a consultant to ensure that you will do a proper job. And it must be viewed within this context. That the political parties wanted to run a transparent, fair, and accountable process. In other words, a process that could be rationalized within the framework of the constitutional setup of a democracy such as Lesotho. They did not want to run a process where they would be accused of favoring candidate A instead of candidate Z. They wanted to run an objective, fair process, and that's why they designed 10 identical questions in dealing with the candidate, so that they extract answers they ask. For instance,
Before you go into the questions,
yes,
let's deal with this issue. Is a constitutional mandate or function delegable to another party? Can a person who is tasked with performing a constitutional mandate delegate such to a private consultant?
my lady.
For instance, before you answer, can
I'm sorry, my lady.
seek the resources, the services of a legal researcher to write judgments for me?
My lady, I'm going to use the example that the ladyship has employed. The court, as things stand, we have two ladies and a gentleman before court. Their role is to assist an incumbent known as a judge to deliver a constitutional mandate. And their role is to say, my lady, I think this would be relevant. Consider this, and you check it.
And we have them in the statute, the act.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I seek the services of a private consultant?
And my lady, I'm going to, although the analogy is slightly different, that's where now section 66(4) comes into play. Let's remember, they're given a blank check in the old days when we're using. Yes, ma'am. They're given a blank check. Use any procedure. The Council of State use any procedure that you deem appropriate. And in their wisdom, they say, hang on, we don't have expertise on assessing people. We know there's something called psychometric test, but we don't have the expertise. What do? They say, let's have somebody who will have the qualification to assist us in ensuring the process is fair, transparent, and accountable. And that's other tenets that they use. And I submit there is nothing wrong in view of the structure and the scheme of the Constitution, particularly the provisions of Section 66(4), which the dual respondent did.
Was recommended.
I beg your pardon.
The rule was recommended.
It was recommended.
Binding.
It was not binding.
On the forum.
No, it was not binding. They could as well reject it and say, we are not going to accord you the 30%. We are going to do it ourselves. We think you are wrong and we are doing it. And they did the bulk of the work. So what is important, Lord, is that somebody recommends, and you look at it, you say, well, I think this is sensible. And they are, if I were to throw an analogy, my lady said, well, can I rely on some third party? A court of law is entitled, in certain circumstances, to rely on the evidence of an expert. To say, I don't have an expertise on medical matters. A medical doctor says, this happened, and this is what happened to Mr. Letsika, and this is the assessment. I don't have that skill. I don't have. I'll rely, and of course you are cautious. You'll have certain principles that guide you to say, yes, based on this, I'm entitled to accept this evidence, and it accords with logic, it accords with experience, and so on and so forth. But in this case, my clients are relying on their experience. They know, oh, this is what we used to do. That's why we have to go into the history of what they used to do as people say, well, this is not working. This has got more weaknesses and problems. They change in 2019, and then they come up to date. They come up with a model. And I may say, my lords and my ladies, I thought the applicants will say, these politicians, they were given a carte blanche, but here they are. They don't just speak, because they could have gone to the streets and say, Mr. Letsika, don't you want to be the chairman? And I would say, well, I'm beginning to become old. I want to be the chairman of the IEC. And then they go to Mr. Asquai. Mr. Asquai, you don't want to be a member. Submit your credentials. And so on and so forth. I'm just using the example of the two of us.
So your submission is that they remained in charge?
They remained in charge.
The 12 respondents remained in charge?
The 12,
despite the use of
a consultant. The consultant was there to assist them to discharge their constitutional mandate. But the final repository of power, the final exerciser of power, if I may say so, was the 12 respondents.
You said the process was transparent.
It wasn't.
Was there a public interview?
Well, this candidate.
My reading of the applicant's case, they said these things were done behind closed doors.
No. They confessed that the television was there. But what my clients did was that you can't run this, you can't air this on live television, because we are having candidates that are asked the same questions on the 28th and on the 29th. If you run live television, the risk you run is that other candidates will come well prepared, because they will know the questions. That, oh, 5 candidates have been asked similar questions. Tomorrow when we ask, we prepare overnight and do also. So they said, we allow media. You can air the proceedings, but unfortunately you can't air them because there is a risk exposure that these other candidates will be unfairly disadvantaged, because the other candidates who come on the 28th will have prepared, they'll have known the questions. But the media was allowed. The national television was there. I guess even the media that is present in court today was there, I don't know. But the media was allowed. They did not run a secret process.
So it's only the embargo regarding
live televised
of the proceedings.
Yes.
That you can record them, but we embargo there publicly.
Until we finalize the process. And that was for that moment only. So they were transparent. And as I say, my lord, they complied even on things where they, in other words, they relented even on things where ordinarily any politician would not relent. And because, I repeat, they wanted to do this process transparently to ensure that the candidates who would come out of it would be candidates who meet the characteristics contemplated in 66(3), I think.
Maybe they should learn from the IEC.
Yes, ma'am.
Some of us were detained, and even our cell phones ceased, so that we don't have access.
I suspect that they will learn that a lot.
To make it more transparent.
To be
For
more
people at
transparent.
home To see how these candidates are performing.
Exactly, my lord. And there's and as I say, my lord, and when institutions of the state and the political parties, to the extent that they were discharging a constitutional mandate, to that limited, they were institutions of state. And they were given a blank check, but they did not say, they did not act irrationally, as it was suggested in the morning. That could they, I know Justice Matawa said to my learned friend, could they not have acted irrationally if they were to pick somebody who did not meet the requirements of the Constitution? And I accept they would. And that's why they said, in view of the importance of the commissioners to the electoral process, to the elections in this country, we must run the process as fairly, as transparent as we possibly can. And they measured up to that task, and they cannot be faulted, my lady. My lady, why I say, and my lords, why I say that is the case, if I may refer the Honorable Court to page 20 of the answering affidavit. I'm using the numbering at the bottom so that I don't get wrong, because I've seen our records have different pagination. They tell the court what they have done, who scored what as a result of the workings that they made. And the court can tell they took the best out of their assessment. And the highest. And let us look at, in that numbering, whether this...
Don't run ahead.
I'm sorry.
We want to take this journey together. When were the results published or known by the forum?
The forum, what happened is that
when were the interviews concluded, and when were the letters written to the candidates?
My lord, the interviews were run from the 28th until 29, and on the same until the 29.
And then the fourth respondent wrote to the second applicant.
Yes.
On the 30th.
On the 30th.
And that's how the outcome of the interview for the position.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
So it was after.
Immediately after. That's I want to take your lordship back. They have time frames. They are under a lot of pressure. And notwithstanding the time pressure, they measure and they try to comply with these processes. So immediately they calculate the overall weighted point of each candidate. They tell every candidate what they are, particularly the complaining candidate, the second applicant,
yes.
The outcome of the process.
Yes. Now, can you go to page 49 of the answering affidavit? I'm interested in paragraph 17.
Paragraph 17 of that affidavit.
Yeah, the answering affidavit.
Thank you.
It is 49 at the bottom. You said you should go by what the pagination of the record of that affidavit. It's page 49.
Page 49 of the affidavit.
Of the affidavit.
Thank you, my lord.
Not of the record. Of the affidavit. And it's 110 of the record.
Nine is something else. It's a supporting affidavit.
Yeah. Paragraph 17 of the supporting affidavit.
Thank you.
Not the answer, not the supporting.
Of the supporting affidavit. Yes, ma'am.
You see that paragraph? It references objections forms.
Yes.
Which were provided or to be provided to all the candidates.
Yes.
To show or state reasons why they should not be disqualified.
Yes.
should we understand the process to have been this way? They applied. Now, when they were invited for interviews, each of them were provided with an objection form.
Yes.
Give us the reasons why we should not disqualify you.
Well, if there are any.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Because, I mean, were they all given those forms?
My Lord, that's what it reads, that each candidate is given objection form.
Yeah.
In other words, you state whether you meet the disqualifying criteria. Look at and if you don't meet the disqualifying criteria, for instance, a judge will say, I am a judge and I'm qualified.
No, I understand, Mrs. Ts'ehla. Where
Yeah.
I just want to ascertain whether or not, in fact, all the candidates were given objections.
They were, my Lord, according to this evidence.
So when the first applicant ticked, he ticked what?
He ticked his form appears as an ncha. Let me quickly get to it, my Lord.
Is it in the founding papers?
No, in the answering papers.
In the answering.
Yes. In the founding papers, he did not disclose that he was given that opportunity.
Is it in the
It will be A9.
A9?
A9 in the it's 124 with the record that I copied for His Lordship Justice Mathaw and Madam Justice Qhalehang. 124 the machine paginated. Yeah. With His Lordship the Chief Justice, I'm not sure. I might be around 130 something.
No, I understand that. So I'm saying he checked being a public officer.
Yes.
So that's it. He says this is the reason why I should be disqualified.
No, he's.
I understand with reference to paragraph 17 of the supporting article, when we said we'll give you an objection form, and in that form state why you should be disqualified.
Yes.
If I'm right in my thinking, then it means when the first applicant checked being a public officer, he was saying that's a ground for disqualification.
Yes, and he was justified.
I want to understand whether, in fact, that's the correct thinking that the purpose of this form is say upfront tell us why you should be disqualified.
In other words, let me put it in the positive.
Okay.
Tell us whether or not you are qualified. In other words, are you qualified or disqualified to participate in the process?
Mr. Letsika,
Yes.
16.
Paragraph 2 of this objection form, it will give us a guideline as to the purpose for which this objection form was received, and even the stage at which it was filled with the recipient with the first applicant.
Yes, ma'am.
A9.
A9.
Yeah.
Paragraph 2. First one, we have the candidate information, and then 2, we have the objection details.
Yes.
And it says, I, the undersigned, submit this objection form in response to claims received from the recruitment agency that I am not eligible for the position of IEC commissioner on the following grounds. And he ticks the grounds that are stated by the recruiting agency, not the ones that he's submitting forward. So he's not saying I am disqualified, I do not qualify because I'm a public officer. He says there is a claim by the recruiting agency that I am not eligible because I am a public officer.
Yes.
Let's look at, to appreciate the sequence, you go to paragraph 16. Page 49 of the, is it supporting affidavit? Page, just above 17.
Yes.
Look at 16. It will appear that after the consultancy firm was engaged, it was given application forms of the candidates. Then there were candidates who had already been identified by the political parties as not meeting some of the requirements.
Yes.
It would appear that at the time that the candidates applied themselves, maybe they were asked if they are engaged in public service or what. Because it was based on their declarations that political parties formed the impression that they do not qualify.
They do not qualify.
Then this dossier
Yes.
was given to the consultant. Then the consultant wrote to them, providing them with this form,
Yes.
which they failed to justify why, in their view, they qualified. That would appear to have been the sequencing of
The sequencing, I accept that. I perhaps stated it broadly, but that evidence is captured by the fourth respondent, and they set out how the events, the facts unfolded, and it seems clearly that's what happened, and in other words, there was an assessment. And once there was an assessment, the political parties formed a view that their candidates who did not meet the criteria, and then they were given their forms. But they look to be standard forms because there is also one which relates to somebody who is not complaining, who works, as I said, in the office of the Prime Minister. That's 810. Looks like to be a standard form which applies to every candidate. In other words, you would now have to state whether you meet the criteria, but it's a standard form. If you look at Annex 810 as well, it runs all the way to the next page.
And the question is, was it given to everyone, or was it given to only those candidates who had been identified by political parties as not qualifying?
My lady, I submit that in view of the evidence on paragraph 16 of the supporting affidavit, it is now clear it was given to only 4 candidates, that the political parties had formed the view that they may not qualify under section 66(6).
Then that answers the serious questions.
That being the case, Mr. Speaker, under statement of the objection, A9, the applicant has not checked or deleted as appropriate. I hereby say that the above claim or claims are incorrect, inaccurate, or incomplete. You see that it says in brackets, delete as appropriate.
Yes.
That has not been done.
No, that has not been
What
done.
he has done is only to provide an explanation.
Yeah, he provides, he goes on to say, well, I know as a lawyer, I get disqualified at the stage of appointment.
Yes.
If I have not resigned from my position as the ambassador.
Yeah.
And I don't, in other words, I cannot be disqualified at the stage of applying.
Yes.
He adopts the same argument as which was adopted by my learned friend yesterday and today when he was making his submission.
So that from what you have just looked at now, is it fair then to prima facie conclude that the process is such that all candidates were vetted by the forum
Yes,
before they were called for interview?
interviews, psychometric tests.
Yes, and those who were not eligible
Yes,
were advised that there's this objection.
complain.
They complain that you are not eligible.
Yes, tell us, you might convince us. In other words, what
Yes,
the
in other words, they were given a right to be heard regarding an alleged basis for
disqualification.
disqualification.
Yes.
Then they did that. After that, then
They
the
said-
forum said, we are not happy with what you are saying. We are not even going to call you for interview.
For interviews, we are not going to shortlist you, we disqualify you.
Okay.
You can't run the race. And which is what I said is a transparent process. For politicians to do that and say, we give you the right to be heard. Give us reasons, and I submit they were running a fair and rational and reasonable process in the particular circumstances, particularly in view of the time constraints that they were working under. My lords and my lady, I therefore submit that they conducted the process in a manner that met the requirements and I would say the expectations of Section 66 4, and therefore that the process that they conducted cannot be impugned. And the question will be, the words which my learned friend grappled with yesterday, the words, a person shall not be qualified to be appointed. My learned friend made two submissions. He said, well, in the face of it, it contemplates that you run through the race until the appointment stage, and what he called eligibility of application. And then it is at appointing stage that now the appointing authority, the Council of State, which will determine whether or not you are qualified, what he termed eligibility for appointment. I submit, my lords and my lady, that the provisions of the section, if they are read in their context and in view of the type of mischief that the lawmaker, the drafters of the Constitution sought to remove, it could only mean one thing, that persons who meet certain characteristics, qualifications, or status are barred from participating in the process. In other words, the provisions of Section 66 in their current state provide a complete bar to persons who, on the evidence, are public officers. They serve members of the public. Now, what is the underlying mischief? The underlying mischief that is sought to deal with is to ensure that people who meet the requirement participate throughout the process because of the following reasons. The limited time frame within which the political parties have to make their decision regarding suitable candidates. And secondly, the type of qualifications that are required for one to qualify. They are set out in the Constitution. So those present the mischief that sought to be achieved is presented by those two factors: the time frames, the qualifications, and by qualifications I mean the constitutional qualifications that have to be met for one to be eligible to be appointed as a member of the commission. This would include things such as, and I'm reading under section 66(2), high moral character, proven integrity, and qualification to hold high judicial office. And I submit that our considerable experience and demonstrated competence in the administration of public affairs. And I submit that if you are in the service, public service, I submit you cannot meet qualification to hold judicial office. And why? Because the concern is about impartiality. The concern is about individuals who run the public affairs objectively. I'm not saying public servants cannot run affairs objectively and fair, but I submit, my Lord,
you have a doubt.
I have my doubts, and so my client, and so the lawgiver. But there is no doubt that a judge can, even in trying times, run public affairs, settle cases where police are involved, where the very police will bring suspects and the judge has to say, you have tortured this person. And that's the quality that we need, that to deal with politicians themselves. despite the fact that they will have appointed or nominated him for selection, he would be able to say that, look, what you did, politicians, is wrong. In other words, the person will be able to assess public affairs objectively and fairly and impartially. That's the quality.
In other words, someone who's not a coward.
Exactly, madam.
Now, can't you have a public officer who's not a coward?
Well, if they're still serving, they look behind their head and they say, what will my boss say if they hear I have said this? And they happen to, there's a candidate who works in the Prime Minister's office. Take that candidate. They're appointed. They'll look back behind their back and say, what will my boss say?
No, it's no more his boss. He has severed ties with the Prime Minister. He has to deliver.
That's why the requirement.
Not think about, in any event, this Prime Minister will be a contestant. So you have to say, Prime Minister, your party is out, or your candidacy is questionable.
Now the lawgiver.
I mean, if he's courageous.
Yes, the lawgiver.
And if you're a judge, if you are not a timid soul, because you might be a timid soul as a judge or a judicial officer. So the point is that you don't need timid souls, whether as judges or not.
Yeah.
But where I am, Mr. Letsika, this objection form,
yes,
it lists the grounds. Now, I was just wondering, why is it that it doesn't reference the criteria in section 66(2) of the Fourth Amendment? And isn't the forum entitled in that form, going forward now, assuming that it has not been doing so, that in that objection form they should also have a provision for, to say that, look, you don't have, there's an allegation that you don't have integrity.
Yes.
Or your moral character is questionable.
Or you are a timorous soul, and they point out to certain facts that suggest somebody's.
I'm not even there, but I'm saying, look at 66(2). A person to be appointed as a member shall be of a high moral character.
Yes, ma'am.
And proven integrity.
Yes.
Now, high moral character. So the political parties will be saying, no, but you see this guy, he's running around with a couple of women here.
Yes, ma'am.
We don't want to. There's an allegation that you run around with women.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm saying that shouldn't the parties themselves to actually have a provision for an objection form containing, a paragraph regarding high moral character and integrity. So you are not a person of integrity.
Yes, ma'am. I've taken note of.
Therefore, you are not eligible.
Yes.
You are not eligible because the way the form now stands, it doesn't advert to
the provisions of subsection 2.
Yeah, it doesn't.
I think they focused more on the disqualifying criteria. If your lordship will look at the form, they focused more on the provisions of 66(6), the disqualifying criteria, and understandably so at the time, because they were saying, just so that we are sure, this candidate. I think they were clear, and I'm working. I can only work on assumptions that they were clear that the issues of moral integrity. We'll look at these candidates. We'll subject them to the process psychometric test. We'll subject them to the questioning in view of where the media is there, where everybody, and try to assess. And ordinarily they would know these people by virtue of their CVs.
The question is, in those questions
yes,
that are formulated by the forum, is there any question that proves high moral character and integrity?
A lot I can only speculate.
No, but I thought you have the questions.
No, I don't have them with me.
Then if they don't have the questions, that's a lacuna.
Yes.
That maybe they might have to improve on that going forward. Because otherwise, I don't see how the parties themselves can kick the can down the line in respect of the requirements of 66(2). I mean, how is the Council of State going to say, now, this guy is questionable? The political parties, don't you think, because you are recruiting now, so that they give the Council of State some sort of a finished product.
Yes.
You understand?
Well, I have noted it, and I'll raise that.
I'm merely saying
Yes,
to do a holistic
a
job.
holistic and clean job,
Yeah,
as they would say.
Yeah, at that basic level, so that candidate so and so, you are not eligible.
Yes, and for that reason,
Yeah.
tell us why we
For
cannot.
the following reason.
Yes,
Then the guy is entitled to say, look, I have integrity.
yes.
You say I have integrity.
I may
What
go to
I'm-
Tibella, but
what
there are
I'm
reasons
saying-
why I go to Tibella.
No?
And you may say, well, you have heard I go to Tibella and all this, but there are reasons why I go to Tibella.
No, you don't maintain your children.
Exactly.
You don't maintain your children. Therefore, you cannot serve in this high office.
Yes, you'll embarrass.
Those are some of the issues that I'm saying.
You don't pay tax.
Or you are a drunkard.
Yes.
You are a drunkard. So that I'm merely saying perhaps those are some of the factors that you look at. Otherwise, I don't see how the Council of State would make that determination at that last stage of the process.
Where they only, and my lord, I entirely agree, because they only have the 5 names, they only have the marks, the scores of the, the submission from political parties that this is how we have assessed these candidates. And they no longer have the raw data.
Yeah.
Now, in other words, the benefit that the political parties have of the raw data, where you have the curriculum vitae of these candidates, and so on and so forth. Yes. My lord, we do not want to take these submissions. We have written comprehensive submissions. I can only add one thing and say that judgment.
No, Mr. Rashford says, as I understand his submission.
Yes, ma'am.
He says the recruitment, the appointment process is a destination, is not a process.
My lord,
So that he's segmenting. He says, look, you should separate recruitment from appointment.
yes.
And if you do that, then the first respondent, applicant,
Yes.
could only be disbarred or be found
Disqualified.
non-appointable
At the appointment stage.
by the Council of State, not the forum.
My lord,
What do you say to
my lord,
that?
I submit that as earlier on I said, it's a complete bar. The provisions of that section, they are couched in the negative, and a person shall not be qualified to be appointed. In other words, a person is disqualified to be appointed if they meet the following characteristics or qualifications: public officer. And we answer a simple question: are you a public officer? You answer in the positive, disqualified. In other words, the provisions of this section are a complete bar. We do not utilize the limited time space over candidates who are disqualified, who we know ultimately will not make it. Let's work on the assumption that the first applicant doesn't resign, or even let's work on the third assumption, doesn't even know that he has been recommended for appointment. He's appointed, boom, and by the Council of State, and His Majesty publishes his name in the Gazette. What happens? Now it's going to embarrass everybody that somebody who did not qualify in the first place has been appointed. And according to the logic of the applicants, then it is only at that stage when he knows he has been successful, he can now resign his position as an ambassador. That's not, I submit, the underlying mischief that the legislature wanted to prevent. The mischief is that you are a public officer, you don't qualify. Put in simple terms and utilize the example that His Lordship employed, His Lordship the Chief Justice employed yesterday. That you are a child, and you will say, well, in December, when the Council of State is sitting, I'll be 18 years, and I'll have completed my master's degree in law. And that's a good one. But you don't qualify. And we have to talk the logic of that. It means they recommend him, they say he will, by the time they sit, he will be 18, he will have a master's in law, and then he will qualify. That's not, I submit, the mischief that the legislature intended to cure. The mischief is read in the context of the professions that persons who apply must qualify at the beginning of the process. And again, I'm taking, and I submit, taking into account the limited time frame, that things are moving very fast. We don't want to assess somebody that engaged in a fetal exercise.
Why should you wait for this to be late, then you have to rush? You know that these commissioners are leaving office in December. Why don't you do these things in the middle of the year?
My Lord,
Is it poor planning?
well, I want to be careful because the Council of State.
No, I'm just saying hypothetical. I'm not seeing on the face. I don't see any reason why you should always be under pressure. Maybe your clients going forward, they shouldn't put them. They know this is the tenure. We don't want these commissioners to be in place again.
And
we might as well. They shouldn't wait for. It seems they wait for the government secretary.
yes,
To convey to them that His Majesty of the Council of State says, give us a list because we have to fill in. I think that because they operate collective, as I understand.
yes.
I don't see any reason why this process should not have been done. Maybe by June, long time ago.
Yes.
So that we are not under pressure now.
But Lord, I submit that
I think that is
an observation.
yeah. Now my question is this. Assume that he's a public officer, he applied. And then an objection form comes. He says, no, I've submitted my letter of resignation. I'm waiting for the response.
Still disqualified. Same as Mr. Sugul, still disqualified. And
No,
the reason is,
I'm saying he says, I have submitted a letter of resignation.
yes. But the issue will be, is he still a public officer? Because remember, Lord, there are processes that have to be met.
When does resignation take effect?
That's the point.
If he says that with immediate effect, I'm resigning.
That's something else. They will say, you are not.
You will say that's something else.
Yes.
So the forum would not be entitled to say you are still a public office.
No. Because you will have resigned. If we look at the authorities in labor law and from the Court of Appeal, if I resign with immediate effect, I've cut ties with my employer. And that's why, my Lord, His Lordship said, well, we don't want timorous souls. Use the word timid. Lord Denning would say timorous souls. And in other words, that's where now courageous people would come in. A courageous person will resign now and say, I resign now. And because I want to go and contest.
No, he resigns when he's given an objective form.
No.
Objection before he fills it.
You resign.
He says, no, I've submitted a letter 12, immediate resignation, and then he fills in the form.
We don't want, my clients don't want opportunists. They want young people. I'm sorry to put it like that. Want people who say, I resign, I want to serve my people. And he goes and submits the letter. If he's working in the Prime Minister's office and say, I resign with immediate effect, what's going on? Well, I want to look for other opportunities. That's a courageous person. But you don't want and hold this letter and say, well, if an opportunity arises, then we cannot trust that if trying times come the way and you have to deal with difficult election questions, you'll be able to deal with it. And my Lord, we have had experiences. I'm sure His Lordship will remember that recently we dealt with reviewing powers where the IEC had to review itself. And that caused a lot of, that nearly caused a lot of political instability. And you can just imagine the people who were members of parliament, who knew that I have 5 years, they had to plan their lives, all of a sudden, boom, the court said, well, we agree with the IEC. IEC, you are right. This criteria of proportional representation allocation seats. So we need people who will be able to discharge that function properly, objectively, and fairly, as I've repeatedly said. My lords and my lady, with those remarks, I submit that our heads of arguments are comprehensive. I was at the point where I was referring the court to paragraph 58 of our heads. We have referred to the Constitutional Court judgment. My learned friend said he is referring to the Supreme Court judgment. That matter reached, and it's only relevant insofar as principles of interpretation are concerned, because it dealt with a situation of a private institute which was providing tuition to prospective lawyers, LLB qualification. And the issue was whether the qualification and the meaning of the word university, whether it then included private institutes who were offering an LLB qualification, in other words, a qualification equivalent to those provided by public universities. That's what the Constitutional Court had to grapple with. But it is relevant not on the issue that we have to deal with, but it is relevant in guiding your lordships as as regards the principles that the court must adopt in interpreting a constitution or an instrument. I did not want to delve into the cases, MOPA case, the many cases that we know, the Mkwebe versus LNIG and the like, which guide us in principles that we use in interpreting constitutions. I thought this would suffice because they went into an elaborate exercise notionally of how you approach an instrument of this nature, and in the context of what we are dealing with, it will provide a guide and our submission is that those provisions provide a complete bar concerning disqualification, and the text and the context demonstrate in clear terms that it's a complete bar insofar as public servants are concerned, or any other category that is mentioned under section 66(6). And those will be our submissions. And perhaps, my lords and my lady, reverting back to the issue, I have made copies of an authority that we did not use. It's in relation to the Procurement Act, where the Commercial Court and so the Court of Appeal recently said if there are remedies provided for in the and decline jurisdiction, this is the matter of monarchic catering. I'll hand in the copies of the judgment because it really was very difficult to track as I was preparing my heads. And speaking of which, my Lord, the Chief Justice, I think we need to work on the mechanism of reporting on Leslie. It sometimes becomes challenging when one is doing the research to track down cases, because I knew I had read this case, but somehow it was eluding me.
You see, it's the problem of procurement. We asked UNDP to assist us with the website, and they then got a private entity like this one. Now those people have rights.
Yes.
You also, they don't want to play ball now because they will now want money.
They want money.
Yeah, but whereas it is the UNDP who says, no, this is the expert that you should need. We are going to pay this expert. Now suddenly when the expert is giving us problems, UNDP doesn't want to play ball.
Yes, my Lord. I think we'll discuss it privately, my Lord. We had, in the old days when I was still a lecturer, we had the same problem with the supply of our system. Yeah. And we found a way out of it, because they would say, well, I have rights. If you are not doing, and we would want to upload things on the internet, the website, and they will say, well, you pay for this ones. And we had to find a way, but we can discuss it.
We are finding a way, I can assure you.
Yes. Oh, I'm hopeful.
This procurement business, that maybe time has come when we should have our own internal experts.
Yeah, the IT people, we have an IT department. They should be able to, it's such a simple exercise, man. And
it's very difficult.
But it's very difficult, and it makes our research I
understand this.
And it can be embarrassing. A lot I write dates and I refer to old authorities, yet there is a new authority. May I hand in the copies of the authority?
Yeah, please.
It's monarchic catering. Incidentally, I discussed it with my learned friend. He featured in the matter.
We'll give it to our class.
Yes.
then they'll make copies for us.
Well, I've already made sufficient copies for your lordships and your lordship.
Please.
Yes.
Give
May
it
I,
to them.
may I? I'll hand him to
Yeah,
them.
hand it to them, they'll give us those copies.
Thank you.
Mr. Aswad,
8 million.